100 years before Nebuchadnezzar took the Israelites captive in Babylon, the Bible tells us the Assyrian king Sennacherib attacked the lands of the Israelites. In the second book of Kings, the Bible says, "Behold what the kings of Assyria have done to our lands, destroying them utterly."
The Assyrians were ruled by despotic kings. They believed in absolute power. Now, absolute power means control, and absolute power almost invariably is kept in power by military efficiency and might. And the Assyrians maintained an enormously powerful and efficient war machine. And on the walls of Assyrian kings' palaces were the chronicles of some of their expeditions, written in vainglorious, grandiloquent terms.
The Assyrians, they would take a city, and they would stack up the heads of the leading citizens outside the gate, or they would take the king of the city and flay him alive and nail his skin to the wall, or something like that. But everybody did that.
Assyrian power, symbolized by the royal lion hunt, lay in the hands of merciless warrior kings. Even the Bible betrays grudging admiration.
Behold the Assyrian. Under his shadow dwelt all great nations.
Ezekiel 31. When the city of Rome was in its infancy, Assyria was the greatest empire in the world. For more than 1,000 years, details of Assyrian civilization were few. Even its great capital city of Nineveh was unknown to the modern world. Then, in 1852, these desolate ruins were explored by British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard. What Layard found here in northern Iraq was nothing less than the royal palace of Nineveh, an unspoiled treasure of Assyrian civilization. Tunneling like a miner through the earth, Layard uncovered great winged bulls and spectacular artistry, hidden from human view for a millennium. The world was stunned and excited by his breakthrough. Nineveh was another biblical city found, yet more confirmation of the Bible's historical accuracy. But the most momentous of Layard's discoveries was the great library of Nineveh, an extraordinary collection of 22,000 clay tablets inscribed with the cuneiform writing of the Assyrians.
The only direct communication that we have with the people of the ancient world, really, is what they left behind in their writings. We can know from that what they ate, what their medical treatments were, what their family life was like, what their politics was like, how they viewed religion.
Details of Assyrian daily life reveal a patriarchal society, a world where commoners, and especially women, had little status.
Every Assyrian woman, once in her early life, before marriage, would go to the temple of Ishtar, and she would sit on the steps, and she would wait there until some man came along and dropped a coin on the hem of her dress, and then she would go inside with him and do her thing, and that was it.
Yet in this despotic world, there was a kind of justice. In marriage, even a wife had certain rights.
A woman could specify in her marriage contract that her husband would have no other wives. She might specify that he could have all the prostitutes he wanted, but no other wives.
But if ordinary women had only limited status, recent discoveries reveal Assyrian queens enjoyed great privilege. In 1989, the ancient palace of Nimrud in northern Iraq set the stage for a startling find. Experts called it the most significant discovery since King Tut's tomb, the treasure of Nimrud.
While we were cleaning some of the rooms, we discovered that there are some indications for a vaulting underneath the floor. We took everything out and we tried to sort it, and we discovered that we have here the bodies of at least 2 queens,
Solid gold bracelets still adorned their bones. A royal treasure, entombed more than 2,000 years ago. This remarkable footage, shot by Iraqi archaeologists, is an exclusive record of their extraordinary discoveries. For the very first time, the tomb of an Assyrian queen had been uncovered intact. The royal sepulchre still displayed a curse to protect its occupants.
Should anyone break open the seal and remove me from my tomb, let his spirit roam in thirst under the bitter rays of the sun, and may the great gods of the underworld inflict his corpse and ghost with eternal restlessness.
Ignoring the curse, archaeologists excavated more than 125 pounds of beautifully crafted jewelry, crystal goblets, and exquisite carvings. The ancient Assyrians were master goldsmiths and artisans. But the value of this treasure far exceeds its worth in gold. In death, Assyrian queens were lavished with riches. But in life, it was her kings who forged history, kings with a taste for empire. In the year 701 BC, King Sennacherib and his army struck out across the desert toward the Mediterranean Sea. The bold Assyrians were determined to conquer all that lay in their path: the cities of Judah, including Jerusalem, and its rebellious king, Hezekiah. Fortress after fortress fell to the Assyrians, but it was the city of Lachish whose brutal destruction is best recorded in the historical record and in the Bible.
The siege of Lachish is a beautiful example of how an Assyrian army descended on a city, surrounded it, besieged it, reduced it, and took away its inhabitants to slavery, those that were not executed, men, women, and children. Their technique was very simple. It was brutal conquest, fast-moving conquest, systematic, efficient conquest. And on the bas-reliefs in Assyrian palaces, you see the siege engines, the soldiers moving up the mounds with the shields above them, protecting them from the debris thrown down below. But they had no hope in hell. Those guys were professional soldiers. It was a machine.
From the capital city of Jerusalem, King Hezekiah knew an Assyrian attack was inevitable. He raced to fortify the city and ordered an underground aqueduct dug, a desperate effort to protect the city's water supply in the face of a siege. Hezekiah's plan worked. The Bible tells us the Lord saved Jerusalem, and the king of Assyria returneth shamefaced to his own land. Sennacherib's version of the conflict was found on a clay prism unearthed at Nineveh. It matches the Bible story down to the smallest details, but its point of view is sharply different.
But as for Hezekiah the Jew, who did not bow down in submission to my yoke, 46 of his strong-walled towns I besieged and conquered. The awful splendor of my lordship overwhelmed him.
Stories are told from different angles, but they are in agreement. If you'll have to tell about what happened today and I'll have to tell, we'll tell different stories. We have the story of Sennacherib invading to this country. Each tells basically about the same historical event with absolutely no contradictions.
No contradictions but one, the result. In Sennacherib's version, Hezekiah is shut up in Jerusalem like a caged bird. But in the Bible, the Assyrian armies are held back by Jerusalem's walls. It is perhaps the earliest example of spin doctors at work. The God of the Israelites has the last word. I will break the Assyrian in my land, the Bible says, for through the voice of the Lord shall the Assyrian be beaten down. Isaiah chapter 6. And the Bible tells us God does destroy Nineveh, throne of the great Assyrian kings. It wasn't the first such annihilation. Long before, the Almighty had laid waste an entire civilization. There is not a single mention of their name in the Bible, but they were called Sumer, and they told the story of a great flood. It's one of the most familiar of all Bible stories, the saga of Noah's Ark. An angry God, a wooden boat, a deluge. It's the story of Noah and his family escaping to the ark with every species of animal and surviving the punishing flood, while the rest of mankind is destroyed. It's a primal tale, stirring our deepest hopes and fears. A story found in the Bible, but also in another ancient text, a text discovered in the ruins of Sumer. Early this century, a group of Mesopotamian tablets were translated. They revealed the earliest known legend of a cataclysmic flood. The world's very first written epic, it is the story of the mythic king Gilgamesh. His tale of a great flood predates the Bibles by at least 2,000 years.
For 7 days and 7 nights, the flood had swept over the land, and the huge boat had been tossed about by the storms.
The boat then runs aground on a mountain. He sends out birds, which is the story which has an eerie similarity to the story of the biblical flood. It's a wonderful story.
More than 5,000 years ago, the story of the Great Flood was first told here, in the ancient cities of Sumer, Uruk, Eridu, and Ur. In Sumer, we find the first of almost everything that makes us civilized. They invented the wheel, government, and gardening. Sumer, the first civilization on Earth. In a land without stone, they devised mud bricks, like those still made and used today. And from these simple building blocks, they erected the first great monuments called ziggurats, towering temples soaring hundreds of feet into the air. The Sumerians invented the 60-second minute and even the troubled teenager.
Where did you go?
I didn't go anywhere.
If you didn't go anywhere, why do you idle about? Go to school, stand before your teacher, recite your homework, write your tablet. Do you understand me?
We know about the Sumerians, their startling innovations, and their everyday lives, thanks to their most impressive invention, writing. We know their ancient legends and their intimate secrets because someone wrote them down. It was something no one had ever done before.
It's a window, but it's a window that's composed of many panes, some of which we can see through and some of which we can't. We lack much more than we have. So while what we have is spectacular in some cases, we always have to bear in mind that there are parts of the daily lives of people that we can never see and which we may never see because they're people that those writing the tablets didn't care about.
5,000 years ago, someone etched their stories into clay, providing us with a glimpse of the world in the first blush of civilization.
As a people, the Sumerians were in some ways much like ourselves. They are concerned about meeting other people and drinking beer and so on. And there are several collections of poems which relate the preparations of a woman for her lover and how she dresses and waits for her lover to come.
The center of Sumerian civilization was the lost city of Ur, once thought to be the birthplace of Abraham, first of the Bible's patriarchs.
It is the epitome of the biblical city in archaeological terms because it was the site of one of the most famous archaeological digs ever carried out in the 1920s and 30s by a remarkable British archaeologist called Leonard Woolley. A British archaeologist once described archaeology as the science of rubbish, which is so true. But give me the archaeologist who can make the stones and the bones and the bricks and the pots come alive. Leonard Woolley was like that. He would take people on a tour of a small quarter of Ur of the Chaldees where the house foundations are exposed. And as you walked through, he would talk about the lives of the people who lived in these houses, talk about the ovens, the sills, the low ceilings, the furniture. And Ur, in Woolly's hands, came alive. Woolly dug this enormous pit, and he went down through the city, and it got smaller and smaller, and then there was this deep, sterile layer of silt. And Woolly himself recounts how his wife came over, looked at it, and she was a rather casual lady in some ways, and looked at it and said, "Oh, well, of course, that's the flood." And lights went off. And Woolly claimed that this was evidence of the biblical flood. And it captured the popular imagination. What did it do? It brought in money. And Ur was a dig that was sold brilliantly.
Speculation about the biblical flood caused a sensation. Even without solid proof, it was as if science and the Bible had united in the bleak desert of southern Iraq. Woolly would eventually unearth an indisputable treasure, a discovery that provided extraordinary insight into this earliest of civilizations, the royal tombs of Ur. Digging in the thick mud, Woolly uncovered 74 carefully arranged skeletons, all entombed at the same time. The burial told the shocking story of a king's final journey into the afterlife and of those who accompanied him.
And from this, he developed a remarkable story of a pre-dynastic royal funeral. And his story went something like this. First, they dug this big pit with a ramp up one side. In the pit, they erected a sepulchre of stone in which the body of the royal personage was placed. Then the entire court filed into the pit. Everybody lined up and stood there with little clay pots in their hands. And then at a signal, they all drank poison. Lay down and died. So the prince went to his grave, accompanied by all his retainers. This has become one of the great discoveries, one of the great funeral accounts of archaeology in early history.
The discovery of the grave pits at Ur was a triumph of archaeology, revealing ancient secrets of the first civilization. But science alone can take us only so far. Where the trail ends, the Epic of Gilgamesh provides the final, tantalizing clues. Clues leading us back to a garden and a place some call paradise.
Ah, the Garden of Eden. In the beginning, God created the world. It's a familiar story. You get these sort of creation myths in almost every society on Earth. It's a very compelling longing of people for a better world. Gardens of Eden, paradises, are people's longing for a less complicated life, or a life of ease, or a reward for having worked so hard.
In the ancient Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh, The name given to paradise is Dilmun.
It's a place beyond the edge of normal human habitation. That's how it features in the Sumerian flood myth. That's where the flood survivor goes to live. And there are other myths which feature Dilmun as a place where everything was perfect.
Dilmun figures in Mesopotamian legend as a sort of Garden of Eden, as a sort of paradise, a place of verdant green and abundant water and cool winds and breezes.
It is a place of wonder, a perfect place. Yet it is also home to a serpent. In the ancient epic, the snake steals away the flower that bestows immortality. And so, like Adam, Gilgamesh must leave the garden and die. The idea of paradise seems universal. But what is it based on? Was there ever really such a place? The clues point to an enchanted, yet very real location. 400 miles south of the ancient Sumerian city of Ur lies the island of Bahrain, a pivotal marketplace on the trade routes across the arid deserts and salt seas of Mesopotamia. Today, Bahrain is something less than paradise, but it was once lush. Once this island had abundant water and thus abundant life. Once, long ago, this was Dilmun. But was it paradise? By comparison to the surrounding desert, it would certainly have seemed so. There was so much water here that what is now a desert island bloomed. It was a garden bearing lush fruit. And there were people here who apparently led a blessed life. More than 85,000 burial mounds dot this landscape, probably the most in any one location in the ancient world. The ancient bones tell us these people were taller and healthier, and they lived longer than anyone else in the region. And in the burial mounds is one more astonishing clue: the remains of snakes, ritually embalmed at some lost moment more than 4,000 years ago. Here in Bahrain, we find the serpent, just as we found it in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and just as we found it in the Bible. Our journey back in time has crossed the lands where the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and the ancient Sumerians once walked the earth. Is it possible to venture even farther, to the land that conceals the very footsteps of Adam? Here faith and reason must part company. We now know there was once an island garden in Mesopotamia. We may choose to believe it was paradise.